Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Rigor Mortis podcast. My name is Adam, and again with me this week, my man to the right, we got Jason.
How are you today, Adam?
I'm doing pretty good, buddy. I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Pretty good. Got a nice little studio down here now.
We keep moving around. We keep changing things up.
Well, the important part is we get it done, right?
That's right. That's right. Amongst all the chaos, we're still getting it done.
Absolutely.
Thanks for braving the little minor ice storm to get here.
It actually wasn't bad out.
Wasn't too bad?
Not bad.
Good. You know how it is out here.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
It can be rough. It can be rough. So what are you bringing to the table today, man? What are we doing?
We're going to do a pretty popular story. We're going to do Ed Gein today.
Classic, yeah. So this one here, I guess we can kind of just jump into Ed Gein because
He's a fucking mess.
he's a fucking mess. Yeah. So where does this go, man?
First, Ed Gein was born in La Crosse County, Wisconsin on August 27th, 1906. He was the second of two boys to George Gein and his mother, Augusta Nelarche Gein.
That's Malarkey.
Gein had an older brother, Henry George Gein, as well.
Augusta despised her husband, an alcoholic who was unable to keep a job. He worked at various times as a carpenter, tanner, and insurance salesman. Boy, that's a variety of work.
Yeah,
Tan your leather and sell you life insurance.
Yeah, sounds like he just kind of does whatever he can get his hands on, I guess.
Whatever, yeah. Now, George owned a local grocery shop for a few years, but sold the business, and the family left the city to live in isolation on a 155-acre farm in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, which became the Gein family's permanent residence.
That's a huge farm.
Yeah, that sounds nice, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the desolation would be interesting, but I mean, back in those days, farming could be lucrative, and there's always something to do, I guess.
I just couldn't imagine all that space. With my life right now, I'm living in a 155 square inch room, and that's about it.
The house I grew up in was 1 acre, square lot, flat. Man, I hated mowing that lawn. I couldn't even imagine 155 acres.
Forested,
yes. Well, Augusta took advantage of the farm's isolation by turning away outsiders who could have some negative influence on her sons. Edward left the farm only to attend school, but outside of school he spent most of his time doing chores on the farm. His mother, Augusta, was very religious.
She would preach to her boys about how messed up the world was, the evils of drinking, and the belief that women, except herself, were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. Of course.
I can't deny that.
I mean,
Devil.
devils.
She did reserve time every afternoon to read them the Bible, usually selecting verses from the Old Testament concerning death, murder, and divine retribution.
The best parts.
Yes, absolutely.
Edward was shy, and classmates and teachers remembered him as having strange mannerisms, such as seemingly random laughter, as if he was laughing at his own personal jokes. To make matters worse, his mother punished him whenever he tried to make friends. Despite his poor social development, though, he did fairly well in school, particularly in reading.
Maybe he was laughing because he farted.
I don't know, man, but I'll tell you what, he's probably laughing because he was kept in such a sheltered environment growing up that he didn't know how to react in front of other people. It's kind of sad.
Have you ever just thought of something randomly that just made you bust out laughing in your own head?
Dude, I do it all the time
Me
at
too.
work.
Me
All
too.
the time at work, and people look at me, and I'm like, I'm just nuts.
Yes.
True crime podcast
Yes.
guy here, so.
I'm not Ed Gein, I swear. On April 1st, 1940, Ed's father, George, died of heart failure caused by his alcoholism. He was 66 years old. Henry and Ed began doing odd jobs around the town to help cover living expenses. The brothers were generally considered reliable and honest by residents of the community. While both worked as handymen, Ed also frequently babysat for neighbors. Wow, knowing what we know now?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Imagine him having babysat your kids.
Not my first choice.
Not at all.
He enjoyed babysitting, seeming to relate more easily to children than adults. I could see that. Now, Henry began dating a divorced single mother of two and planned on moving in with her. Henry worried about his brother's attachment to their mother and often spoke ill of her around Ed.
Yeah, from what I understand, he didn't respond well when his brother was talking about his mother. He was pretty shocked and hurt when he'd do that.
Just do it to piss him off.
He probably did it to try to awaken him a little bit, I guess.
That could be, yeah. Try to show him how messed up she is.
Right, you can get away from mom. It is okay, but...
On May 16th, 1944, Henry and Ed were burning away marsh vegetation on the property The fire got out of control, drawing the attention of the local fire department. By the end of the day, the fire having been extinguished and firefighters gone, Ed reported his brother missing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. With lanterns and flashlights, a search party searched for Henry, whose body was found lying face down.
That's not good.
Yeah, well,
I think it was smoke inhalation or something.
Well, here's the thing. Apparently, he had been dead for some time, and it appeared that the cause of death was heart failure, since he had not been burned or injured otherwise.
Wow.
Which kind of makes sense. The stress of what's going on and all. I mean, I can kind of see that.
Yeah. Later on, though, there was a report that Henry had bruises on his head when they found him. So, nonetheless, the police dismissed the possibility of foul play being involved, and the county coroner actually listed the official cause of death as asphyxiation.
Interesting.
So probably from the smoke, I would guess.
Possible, yeah. The authorities accepted the accident theory, but no official investigation was conducted, and an autopsy was not performed, so there's no way to verify that for sure.
Right.
Some suspected that Ed Gein killed his brother. Questioning Ed Gein in 1957, state investigator Joe Wilmowski brought up questions about Henry's death. George W. Arnott, who studied the case, wrote that, in retrospect, it was possible and likely that Henry's death was the Cain and Abel aspect of the case. Super interesting, right?
I would believe that. I mean, Ed probably had resentment towards his brother for talking negatively about his mother, and also probably wasn't too happy that his brother was moving out.
Oh, I'm sure.
I would imagine, living on a farm that big, having his brother move out is going to leave a lot more on Ed's shoulders.
A little bit of change there was just a bit much for him.
Right. But at this time, Ed and his mother were now alone, and his mother had a paralyzing stroke shortly after Henry's death, and Gein devoted himself to taking care of her.
Sometime in 1945, Gein later recounted he and his mother were visiting a man named Smith who lived nearby to purchase straw.
Yeah, according to Ed, his mother actually witnessed this Smith guy beating a dog, and a woman inside the Smith home came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith actually beat the dog to death.
Jeez.
Now, Ed's mom was actually extremely upset by this, of course, but she actually wasn't too bothered by the brutality towards the dog, but she was more bothered by the presence of the woman. She told Ed that the woman was not married to Smith, so she had no business being there.
Wow.
Yeah, so this kind of shows you what his mom felt about stuff like this. But his mother actually has a second stroke soon after, and her health deteriorated pretty rapidly, and she died on December 29th, 1945 at the age of 67.
Ed was devastated by his mother's death, of course. In the words of author Harold Schnechter, he said he had lost his only friend and one true love, and he was absolutely alone in the world. Well, that's messed up.
Ugh.
Now, Gein held on to the farm and earned money, doing all kinds of different odd jobs, whatever he could do to pay the bills, you know what I mean, to keep things going.
What's weird is he actually boarded up all of the rooms in the house that were used by his mother, including the upstairs, the downstairs parlor, and the living room, and basically just left them untouched, while the rest of the house became increasingly messy and in disarray.
He's living in a much smaller space.
Right, but those rooms he boarded up remained in pristine condition.
For his mother.
Sure.
Most likely.
Sure.
3 rooms remain pristine. That's what. So basically, what you're saying is he closed up the doors, locked it up, never went in there again.
Right. That's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
So he actually ends up just living in a small room next to the kitchen, and around this time he became interested in reading pulp magazines and adventure stories, particularly those involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities.
What the hell is a pulp magazine?
We don't have magazines, so I couldn't tell you.
I couldn't tell you. Yeah, I don't do that shit either. Now, Gein was a handyman and received a farm subsidy from the federal government in 1951. He occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop thrashing crews in the area. So he worked on other farms, did all kinds of other things, like we said, to pay the bills. Sometime between 1946 and 1956, he also sold an 80-acre parcel of land that his brother Henry had owned in the past.
And I think this was separate from the farm that they had.
It was on a completely separate
I believe
lot.
so, yeah.
Maybe another end of town.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Now, on the morning of November 16th, 1957, Plainfield hardware store owner Bernice Warden disappeared. A Plainfield resident reported that the hardware store truck had been driven out from the rear of the building sometime around 9:30 a.m. The hardware store was closed for that entire day, which some residents believed was because it was deer hunting season.
Hell yeah. I
Yeah.
think you shut down everything for deer hunting season.
Right. Well, Bernice's son was actually the deputy sheriff, Frank Warden. He entered the store around 5 p.m. to find that the store's cash register was open and there was bloodstains on the floor. So, of course, he's starting to be concerned for his mother and things like that. I mean, I would imagine that's quite a scary scene.
Yeah, time to look into things. Now, Frank Warden told investigators that Ed Gein had been into the store the evening prior, and that he would return the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze.
I wonder why he had to come back the next morning for that.
You missed something off that shopping list, I guess.
Yeah, but he said he'd be in the next morning for it. He already knew that he needed it.
Strange, yeah, I guess.
Like maybe he didn't have the money for it or something. But
yeah.
Nonetheless, a sales slip for that gallon of antifreeze was the last receipt that was written by Bernice on the morning that she disappeared. And on the evening of that same day, Gein was arrested at a West Plainfield grocery store, and the Washoe County Sheriff's Department ended up searching his farm. That's not good.
Now, the county sheriff's deputy discovered Warden's decapitated body in a shed on Gein's property, hung upside down by her legs with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrists. The torso was, quote-unquote, dressed out like a deer. Now, that's disgusting.
That is, yeah. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations on her body and basically the undressing, I guess you'd say, happened after her death. So, not good. But they ended up finding more than they bargained for on Ed's farm.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Hey guys, we want to take a moment to tell you about this new exciting game that we've been playing called Best Fiends. Now, true crime is our passion, but even we need the occasional break. So when we need that mental palate cleanser, our go-to for a refresher is Best Fiends. Let me tell you what, I was super excited when they approached us in regards to sponsoring our podcast because I'd been playing Best Fiends for months.
Now, I've only been playing this for a few weeks since you told me about it, but I really enjoy how challenging the puzzles are, and it helps keep my brain fresh for all of the information we have to take in while recording the podcast.
This game is definitely challenging, Jason. You got that right. And a lot of fun to play. So engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must play. So do yourself a favor like Jason and I have and download Best Fiends for free. It's a great game. We definitely think you'll enjoy. Again, check out Friends without the R. Best Fiends. Download it today.
To find more than that. Now, of course, they were looking for Bernice's body. What they actually end up finding is a woman named Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag. They find Mary Hogan's skull in a box. They find Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack. They find Bernice Warden's heart in a plastic bag in front of Gein's pot-bellied stove. So,
ready to cook.
Right, yeah. So he'd been reading all these books about cannibalism, and it sounds like he was ready to give it a shot himself.
9 vulvas in a shoebox. He's got 9 more vulvas than I do.
Sounds like a 50 Shades of Grey type of movie.
Yeah, pretty messed
nine
up.
vulvas in a shoebox.
A young girl's dress. The vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old. A belt made from female human nipples.
My favorite.
How many nipples does it take to make a belt? You must be a small man. 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade from the skin of a human's face, fingernails from female fingers.
This is just nasty. I couldn't even imagine. I mean, being a detective that stumbled across this, you must be scarred.
I mean, and all this stuff was, of course, photographed and then taken to a crime scene.
Yeah.
A crime scene laboratory.
Crime laboratory, yeah. And then I think they ended up destroying it after. But, so, based on all these findings, I would assume that Ed has probably been killing people for quite a while.
Oh, of course.
That's what it sounds like. But
and
I
he's had
don't
time
necessarily
to-
think that's the case, though.
Really? So what happens?
So when he gets questioned, Ed tells investigators that between 1947 and 1952, he had made as many as 40 nocturnal visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume recently buried bodies while he was in a dazed-like state.
So he's digging up corpses. That's what it sounds like.
That's what he says.
On about 30 of those visits, he said he came out of the dazed state while at the cemetery, kind of like, what the hell am I doing? He left the grave in good order and returned home empty-handed. Now, on other occasions, he had dug up the graves of recently deceased middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother. Now, this is kind of interesting because this tells me that there's no way he was in some kind of a dazed state. He must have been following up with the newspapers and other things going on to find out who was dying, where they were buried.
That's a great point. I mean, he's not just going to the graveyard and seeing 5 graves and going, this one must look like my mother. I mean, he's either digging them all up or he kind of has an idea of who might be in that grave.
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, you can look at the headstone, do the math and all that.
That's a good point.
But I feel like in order to be a successful grave robber, if you're looking for a certain type of body, you'd have to keep up with things. And this wasn't a very busy area. It's not like over here.
No, Plainfield, Wisconsin. I mean, they're not talking about New York City where there's hundreds and hundreds of bodies. I mean, they must have...
Or even out in a place like this, where we live, where, just wait a few days, you'll get yourself a middle-aged woman. You probably could dig up a couple every week.
Just off the top of my head, just thinking, I can think of 4 or 5 cemeteries just off the top of my head in this city, and I'm sure there's plenty more than that.
Yeah.
But we live in a pretty small area, and I can just think of
I bet you he was willing to travel, too.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I kind of would say he was not in some kind of a daze or a trance. It was more like most other people that have these mental illnesses where it was more of an itch that he couldn't.
Right. And the thing is, too, is with this, like, coming out of this daze-like state while he's at the graveyard, how many times did he, take the body out of the grave and whatnot while he was in this daze-like state? And then he gets back to his house when he starts stripping them of their skin and stuff. Did he not ever come out of the daze-like state then and think, what the fuck am I doing?
What am I doing? I got this corpse in my house. And or how about this? Did you ever come out of that daze-like state and be like, I got vulvas in a shoebox and skulls on my bedpost?
Right.
What the hell am I doing?
And he had to have known what he was doing because he wasn't letting people in his house. So he knew what he was doing was wrong.
Of course.
But he obviously his relationship with his mother, he was just trying to recreate as much as he could. He couldn't live with the fact that she was gone. Now, Adam, he's bringing all these bodies back to his house. Wouldn't you think that they would just keep decaying and whatnot? I mean, how was he able to, make these lampshades and whatnot? I don't know much about rotting bodies, but I would think that the skin wouldn't be staying strong enough for that.
Jason, fortunately, I know a shit ton about rotting bodies. And Ed Gein, having a history of being a tanner, he was able to treat the human flesh like leather or like the flesh of other animals and make it, usable so we can preserve it. You know what I mean? Almost like a leather jacket or any other type of leather material that you would use. Now, Ed Gein had admitted to stealing from 9 graves from local cemeteries and led investigators to the location. So he's doing a full confession now.
Right, well, I'm sure that when the police, found all this stuff at his house, they weren't thinking grave robbing. They were probably thinking these are all people that Ed had murdered.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. So he does tell them that he had robbed 9 graves. So Alan Wilmofsky of the State Crime Laboratory participated in opening 3 test graves that were identified by Ed. The caskets were inside wooden boxes and the top boards ran crossways, not lengthwise. The tops of these boxes were about 2 feet below the surface in sandy soil. So these weren't very deep graves.
No, easy to access.
You're right.
Gein had robbed the graves soon after the funerals and while the graves were still not completed. So this was like before seeds were planted down. Like it's almost like that night. Like
right.
I wonder if he would sit there and watch the funeral, wait for everybody to leave, and then return back at night with his shovels and his pickaxes and dig up everything and then get what he wanted and then, level out the ground again and make it look like it had been untouched.
Right, that's my guess as well. I mean, these test graves were exhumed because authorities weren't sure as to whether Gein was capable of single-handedly digging up a grave during one evening. So they did actually find these graves exactly as how Ed had described. 2 of the graves were found empty. 1 had a crowbar in place of the body, and then 1 casket was empty. And he had failed to open one because he had actually lost his pry bar. So
buried it with the other casket.
There it is.
Oh, shit. Poor Ed.
He's probably thinking that as they open it. He's like, there it fucking is, damn it.
Now, what's kind of interesting is that he is not like your typical grave robber, where he would return later on and return things like rings and necklaces and other valuable items to the grave. See, he only wanted body parts.
Yeah, well, he'd also returned some of the body parts that he didn't, think were useful to him. So I think that the reason for this is that soon after his mother had died, he had actually began to create a quote-unquote woman suit so that he could become his mother and literally crawl into her skin.
Wow.
So messed up. But what's interesting is Ed does say that he did not have sex with any of the bodies that he just exhumed because they smelled too bad.
We can take comfort in that.
Yeah, so he wouldn't have sex with them. He would just have them all over his house as lampshades and whatnot. So that's better.
During state crime laboratory investigation, Gein also admitted to the shooting death of Mary Hogan, a tavern owner missing from 1954, whose head was found in his house, but he later denied memory of the details of her death, so he kind of recanted that. He probably thought, grave robbing, bad. Murder, even worse. Let's take this back another step.
Right.
You know?
And I don't think this was a huge secret either, because there was a 16-year-old whose parents were friends of Ed who attended ball games and movies with him, and they actually said that Ed kept shrunken heads in his house. But Ed had actually said that he got these as relics from the Philippines sent by a cousin who had served on the islands during World War II.
Upon investigation by the police, these were determined to be human facial skins, carefully peeled from corpses and used by Gein as masks.
So he was just trying to cover his bases, I think, in case anybody had seen these heads or anything like that. Like, oh, I have a reason for them. They're from the Philippines. Like,
I wonder how bad his place smelled. I wonder if it was like John Wayne Gacy kind of stink.
well, have you ever the Cleveland Strangler?
Yeah, Torso Killer or whatever.
I think it was Cleveland Strangler,
Yeah.
Anthony Sowell or whatever. He had so many bodies in his house that they literally blamed it on the sausage factory next door, how bad it smelled.
And nobody was going there.
No, because everybody thought it was a sausage factory. And he just had tons of decaying bodies in his house. So messed up.
Gein was also considered a suspect in several other unsolved cases in Wisconsin, including the 1954 disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, a lacrosse babysitter.
Oh, probably trying to take out his competition. I mean, if anybody's going to babysit around here, it's going to be me.
It's going to be Ed all the way.
That's right. So during questioning, Washura County Sheriff Art Scaly reportedly assaulted Ed by banging his head and face into a brick wall. He probably deserved it.
I'd say so.
But as a result of this, Gein's initial confession was ruled inadmissible. Now, Scaly actually died of heart failure at age 43 in 1968 before Ed's trial, and many who knew him said that he was traumatized by the horror of Ed's crimes, and this, along with the fear of having to testify about assaulting Gein, is actually what caused his death. Now, his friends say that he was just as much a victim of Ed Gein as anybody else that he had butchered.
It almost reminds me of like those old cop movies that you see where the police use these aggressive interrogation tactics, but slamming a guy's head into a wall, that's pretty wild.
That's pretty intense.
Nowadays, that would definitely get thrown out in court.
And I don't really know how big Ed is, but from the pictures I've seen of him, he's a pretty tiny guy.
Yeah, he looks kind of meek.
It doesn't seem like it'd be too hard to bash his head against a brick wall.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree. Now, on November 21st of 1957, Gein was arraigned on one count of first-degree murder, and he was sent to the county courthouse, where he pled not guilty by reason of insanity.
That seems fair.
Of course, yeah, I would say so. You know, I've got human lampshades.
And he doesn't remember it and things like that. I mean, he claims that he had these, awakenings or whatever while he's in this trance-like state. I mean, I don't know, what mental issue he might have had, but it seems pretty clear he had something.
Well, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was found mentally incompetent, thus unfit for trial. So that's kind of an interesting... I like to see him go to trial myself.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
He was sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, a maximum security facility in Waupun, Wisconsin, and later transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. In 1968, doctors determined Gein was mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense. So now he's going to court.
Right.
That's what that sounds like.
Yeah, the trial begins on November 7th, 1968, and it only lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist testified that Gein had told him he did not know whether the killing of Bernice Worden was intentional or accidental. Gein told him that while he examined a gun in Worden's store, the gun went off, killing Worden.
I never examine loaded guns, just to practice.
Well, here's what's funny. She had actually given him this gun, and he actually loaded a bullet into the rifle, and it discharged. So why would he just load a bullet into a gun he's just checking out unless he has intentions to use it?
Yeah, kind of messed up.
It doesn't make much sense to me.
He said he had not aimed the rifle at Worden and did not remember anything else that happened that morning.
Well, very clearly it was pointed at her.
Yeah, and so I love how these guys can never remember anything that involves them doing anything bad.
Right, right. And what's funny to me is that, or not funny, I guess, is that he claims to not have any knowledge of this. He claims it would be an accident. Why did he take her body back to his house and, hang it up from chains in his garage and undress her like a deer?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Oh, I'm going to make a phone call. I accidentally shot this woman while examining this gun, yada, yada, yada.
You're going to stay right in the hardware store.
Right.
Or wherever the gun, it was a hardware store, right, I believe.
Right, yeah.
And, yeah, you're going to get some help right away.
Instead, he loads her into the car and brings her back and treats her like an animal, which is not going to help his case, I wouldn't think.
Or maybe he was like, oh, look, a fresh corpse. Maybe I could do some tanning. Fire up that sewing machine.
Oh, happy accident.
Happy accident. Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll deal with this later. I don't know.
No.
Hard to put yourself into his mind because he's completely nuts.
I couldn't even imagine being an investigator in this case. When you show up at his farm looking for this body, probably thinking, oh, no, this is the Geins, respected members of the community. A little weird, but, they're well known and whatnot. And you open his garage door and to see a body hanging there. That was... Ugh.
Especially in a rural community where things like this do not happen.
Right.
I mean, murder, it does not happen, but the disgusting stuff definitely would not happen. This the police must have needed therapy and all that after all this if they did that kind of stuff in the 40s.
Right, yeah.
40s
Back then you had to deal with it.
Yeah, you just cope.
Yeah. Well, at the request of his defense, Gein's trial was held without a jury, and Judge Robert H. Golmar presided over the case. Ed was found guilty by Golmar on November 14th. His second trial dealt with Ed's sanity. After testimony by doctors for the prosecution and defense, Golmar ruled that Gein was not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him to be committed to Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, which is where Gein spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital.
Judge Golmar wrote that due to the cost of the trials and all this, Gein was only tried for one murder instead of everything that had gone on. That's terrible, isn't it?
Right, he was only tried for Bernice Warden's murder, pretty much probably because it was an open and shut case, but he also admitted to killing Mary Hogan, whose skull they found in his house, which is interesting because nowadays, they want to get you for everyone, to bring justice to the victims and also to get you these maximum charges in case,
something falls through the cracks, they still would have the other murder to fall on.
Right. But, I guess Mary Hogan never got her justice for this.
And her family didn't either, and that's unfortunate.
Right.
Yeah, terrible. The Gein's house, now remember, this was a 195-acre property. This was appraised at a whopping $4,700. Now, in modern days, this would be equivalent to $4,200. $42,000, which is not much of a piece of property.
Not for that many acres. That's insane.
The house and the structures and all that, this place must be real shitty.
Right. I mean, I guess the reputation of it doesn't help either. But no. His possessions were scheduled to be auctioned on March 30th, 1958. But amidst rumors that the house and the land it stood on might become a tourist attraction, early in the morning of March 20th, the house was destroyed by a fire. Now, a fire marshal reported that was a trash fire that had been set 75 feet from the house by a cleaning crew that was tasked with disposing of all the furniture and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to dispose of everything.
Yeah.
I'm not cleaning this place out. If I have to take out one more human flesh lampshade, I'm going to light this place up.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the fire department thinks that all these hot coals that were recovered from the spot of the bonfire, they may have leaked over to the house. But it's found that wasn't the case, and arson was suspected. Basically, somebody probably said, not in my fucking community. Like, I'm not going to have people coming here to witness this grisly attraction.
Glorify the acts of this sicko.
Right, like we do, apparently.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, if you do a true crime podcast, that's all you hear is like, oh, you guys glorify murder. Well, whatever.
Yeah. We don't necessarily do that. I know what you're saying. I mean, in a case like this is an older story, kind of a funner one to do, but when it's something that's more recent and current, we try to maybe shed light on it, try to bring investigators to look at things again, try to get people in these communities to start talking again.
Right. Well, they didn't want this house to become a tourist attraction, but Ed Gein's 1949 Ford sedan, which he had actually used to haul the bodies of his victims, was sold at a public auction for $760, which was equivalent to about $6,700 in today's money. This car got sold to Carnival sideshow operator Bunny Gibbons, and he charged carnival goers 25 cents to see it.
He got his money back.
Oh, I'm sure he
did.
did.
Real quick, I'm sure.
Sure he did. There's actually, I don't know where it is. I almost think it's in Atlanta or something like that, where there's a serial killer museum, and they have like Ted Bundy's car and shit like that there. Man, I'd love to go to that place.
I wonder if Ed Gein's truck was yellow.
I bet it was, too.
I'll tell you, stay out of the yellow vehicles. You guys listening at home, don't get into a yellow vehicle. Don't do it. Please.
If your Uber pops up, yellow car, cancel it.
Cancel, reschedule. Now, Ed Gein had died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute due to respiratory failure to lung cancer on July 26th of 1984.
Hey, he lived till he was 77 years old, though.
Yeah, over the years, souvenir seekers chipped pieces from his gravestone at the Plainfield Cemetery until the stone itself was stolen in the year 2000. What a souvenir.
Yeah, it was recovered in June 2001 near Seattle, so halfway across the country, and placed in storage at the county sheriff's department. The gravesite now is unmarked but not unknown, and he is interred with his parents and his brother in the cemetery. So at the end, he got what he wanted. He's back with his mom. Very
interesting, and this was such a bizarre story for back in those days, you know what I mean? Murder wasn't an unknown thing. Crime, rape, all these things were not unknown things back then. But the disgustingness of this, of grave robbing and piecing human flesh and tissue together to make other things, was something that affected people, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the country. And this sparked up all kinds of movies. This, of course, later on would spark up things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacres. Have you ever seen the movie Deranged?
I have not.
That's an older movie from the 80s. And I want to say, I can't say that it follows the story to a T, but it's based very heavily on the Ed Gein story, where his mother passes away, he has nobody else, was beyond being a mama's boy,
right.
Has mommy's corpse in the house, and then starts digging up other ones and finds other folks in the community, other women rather, and starts to do the same thing, where he's piecing bodies together to make friends.
Oh, man. Now, do you think that, just for argument's sake, do you think that him killing Bernice Worden was an accident?
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. I think it was upping his thrill to the next level.
Now, Bernice's son, who was the county sheriff, he actually made statements at one point that he was in the hardware a few times with his mother, of course, and while Ed was in there shopping, and he said he was always very uncomfortable with the way that Ed looked at his mother.
Yeah?
Yeah, like, not necessarily like he was going to kill her, but almost like Ed kind of looked at her like he was almost obsessed with her and things like that.
I wonder how similar she looked to his mother.
I've had that thought as well, because it seems to be like that was his main attraction of everything in life. If they looked anything like his mother, or if they even made him think of his mother, it was something that he was, interested in.
Now, do you find it to be kind of odd that Ed Gein was, I guess you could say a heterosexual? And I say that in a sense where, and I don't want to get hated on for this, but a lot of times these guys also have other sexual things going on.
Yeah, a lot of times these crimes are sexually related, but for him, I mean, it really just seems like it all boils down to his mother. I mean, I don't know if he just thinks his mother was, the
supreme woman, the supreme being.
Right. And, his mother did have it bred in him that all other women were just nothings, basically, so.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, you know what I mean? You would think, because this isn't that uncommon for, a serial killer, or he's not really necessarily a serial killer where he's killed two people, but he's certainly done a lot of, really fucked up things. It's not that uncommon for these guys to have, issues with their mother, if not issues with their father, but it usually seems like it's issues with the mom. And in this case, Ed Gein's mom is, there's me on a pedestal, and then all these other women who are below me, the cheating and all the other, shit that he was saying to them.
One thing that I'm curious about is, of course, his mother had it bred in him that all other women are trash, and he shouldn't, look forward to other women and things like that. I am wondering, based on what Bernice's son said, the way he looked at her, I'm wondering if he almost had some sort of feelings towards Bernice and didn't know how to handle it and felt like it was wrong because of everything that his mother had instilled in him.
Dude, that makes total sense.
And maybe he killed her because of that.
Because Ed wasn't terribly old. He had needs, you know what I mean, like everybody else does. And how do you cope with those kind of sexual desires when, women are when you've been taught your entire life that women are filth and you need to stay away from them except your own mother.
Right.
And then your mother dies, the love of your life, if you would. And then what do you do? How do you cope with that?
That's a good point. I mean, I definitely think that I think his mother dying really sent everything off the rails because he didn't have anybody to look to for advice and things like that. I mean, I haven't seen any reports that any of his little lampshades and things like that were built before his mother died. This all seems like things that happened after his mother died.
After his mother died, when you count on just one person for everything, you're raised and told you can only count on your mother, you can't count on anybody else. The mother dies, and this is what triggers him. This is what spirals these events to occur. I
mean, with all the stories we've done, you can always point to one event that is the triggering event for all these things. I mean, sometimes it's a brunette woman scorned this guy in high school, so he decides he's going to kill all brunette women in his life. It's always one event, and for Ed, it just seems like his mother was just everything to him, and
it seemed to me like he kept trying to recreate the mother that he had lost, and there was no way for him to do this. Especially of course, but especially by grave robbing.
There was a way. It was a skin suit.
It was a skin suit, but, he did the grave robbing thing. Maybe what it was he didn't necessarily, maybe, I think you're right. Maybe he was in love with, the two victims that he had murdered. But I'm willing to wager that they had traits that his mother had, very similar traits as his mother, and he got to a point where he had to have them in some way.
I would agree. But, I don't know, man. All the disgusting things he did, could you imagine crawling into a skin suit?
I couldn't imagine any of this, dude. A shoebox of vulvas? I've never even thought of shoebox of vulvas. That has never crossed my mind. Skin suit? I'll be honest. I watched enough horror movies. I've thought skin suit. Box of vulvas? Nope. This is totally bizarre. Hanging pieces off the curtains. The whole thing. Why would you bother returning parts you don't need? Seems like you need everything.
And I didn't see that they had any evidence of him actually indulging in cannibalism, but it almost seemed like he had intentions to.
He had the heart out by the...
Right. And he was reading the books and things like that. So.
And how good was the investigation in the 40s and 50s as far as forensics and being able to... There was none of this.
Well, it couldn't have been a hard investigation. You walk in and find fucking body parts everywhere. It's just kind of...
Let me show you where I dug them up.
Right.
So, very bizarre, man. This is a very bizarre story. Glad you brought it to us. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of knew it before. I didn't know it that well, I guess, outside of, hey, this guy is, these movies are loosely based off of Ed Gein.
Right, yeah. Me too, yeah. But let us know what you guys think about why he may have done these horrific crimes. Yeah, we love all the emails we're getting. We've been getting hundreds almost, it seems, every week. You can hit us up at therigormortispodcast@gmail.com. Yep, and also at Rigor Mortis on all things social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. All that good stuff. You can follow us separately. You can find me on all things social media at Dr. Scullyfingers. Yep, and I am on Instagram on rigormortis_JLEW. Love the feedback. Thank you guys for sharing our episodes, getting this out to your friends. Greatly appreciated, and we look forward to sending you guys off with another episode next week. See you soon. Bye-bye.